Every pianist has heard of Hanon. Every teacher has an opinion about Hanon. You either practice his exercises every day or you never touch them. You either teach his exercises to every single student of yours or you never teach them. But what if there was a new and revolutionary approach to Hanon exercises? Would you be interested if you already play and you teach Hanon? Would it change your mind if you don't? Today we're talking about this book, the new Virtuoso Pianist, published by Faber Piano Adventures and Hal Leonard. It was released in early 2017, which was nearly 150 years after the first edition of Hanon's virtuosic exercises. And if you don't already know about this book, I promise you it is going to change your life at the piano forever. No, I really mean it. So you've probably already realized that I have a high opinion of this book, but I just want to tell you that this video is not sponsored by Faber or by Hal Leonard. I'm just giving you my completely honest and transparent opinion about what's in these pages. So it can be tempting to dive right into the exercises, but the very first page after the title page, page 2, is called Why This Edition, and it's incredibly important to read. It explains how the modern piano is so much different than the piano of Hanon's era or the piano of Chopin's era, especially in regard to the weight of the keys, how much weight it takes to depress a key. And this book cites a Chopin-era broadword piano would take 50 to 65 grams of weight to depress a key, not necessarily to play a note, just to depress a key. A modern grand piano can take up to 110 grams of weight to depress a key. That's double, approximately, depending on how you figure your math. It's about double. But what this page doesn't mention is that the force required to play at various dynamics isn't just double the amount of energy. It's actually well in excess. It increases exponentially. So if we play piano or pianissimo, maybe it's about twice as much energy to play that on the modern piano as opposed to Chopin's. When we increase that to forte, it is much more than twice the amount of energy needed to activate the mechanism, to throw the hammer into the string. And if we want to play even bigger than that, fortissimo, it is again much more than what forte was, much more energy. This page also addresses problems that Hanon has created for so many pianists, which is added tension instead of added dexterity. Now, one thing that it doesn't mention that I'm going to add is that Charles Hanon was actually trained as an organist. Now, the organ and the piano might both be keyboard instruments, but the approach to technique for each instrument is completely different in the modern era. So already, we're at page 2, and what a resource to help educate or re-educate people about Hanon and the original set of exercises, as well as provide a fantastic reason for the redesign of practice formulas that are in this book in the pages that are to come. Now, we go past that page, turn past the table of contents, and we're looking at page 4. It's called How to Practice. And this page is full of really amazing tips. I'm just going to highlight 2 of my favorites for today. Those 2 are avoid pressure on the key bed after a key is played. That's so amazing. Second point, play each finger with immediate relaxation after the impulse, yet without losing the hand structure. Imagine consecutive ripples or strong puffs of air. Now, just those 2 statements, I could give a masterclass. I could give hours of masterclass on each one of those 2 statements. And those are only 2 of the statements on this page. And this page is full of really amazing information. So that's just super cool. There's so much great stuff on how to practice. And it doesn't just apply to this book, but it applies to practicing at the piano in general, really. Just all kinds of great advice. All right, getting into the meat of how this retooling of Hanon is presented. The first pages of music detail 3 what they're calling essential gestures that are referred to throughout the remainder of the book. Those 3 gestures are the swoop, the arc, and around the corner. Now, these motions basically boil down to simple directions on what to do with the wrist and the forearm, which keep a healthy motion going on in the body, and also which translate wonderfully into the many ways that we approach phrases in real repertoire, especially repertoire from the Romantic era and beyond. The swoop is from fingers 1 to 5, and it involves a drop into the first note followed with a downward wrist half circle like this. And the left hand, you get get the idea. There's a little bit more information presented on that page, but let's move on to gesture 2. The arc is the opposite motion, so it's moving from the 5th finger back to the 1st finger. It again involves a drop into the 1st note, but then an upper wrist circle as we approach the bottom note. So with the right hand, you get the idea. With the left hand, ascending. Okay, and then gesture 3, called around the corner, combines both of those. So we begin with a downward motion into the key and a downward half wrist circle, followed by an upward half wrist circle, half circle of the wrist. That's great. And with the left hand in reverse. Really wonderful stuff. Now, you may have noticed that I'm actually phrasing things. There are phrase markings on the page. There are staccato markings on the page. There are accents. There are articulations everywhere, which is awesome. And then combine that with the fact that part 2 starts to introduce the concept of rotation. And when you practice this book as it's laid out and as it's intended to be, you're going to be incorporating the same areas of the body that are required to produce beautiful tone and beautiful music. And those are the same areas that we must develop to achieve a virtuosic technique on the modern piano. It's what I call a technique capable of pianistic gymnastics without injury. Plus those articulations and the phrase markings, they keep our ear involved in the creation of sound at the piano, which is so important. So even though these added gestures and revisions to the approach to Hanon, they don't make the exercises as musical as an etude or another short study, I would absolutely use this book alongside Czerny or any other short, more musical etudes, because the patterns here and the physical gestures developed here are going to very obviously translate into other works where the development of the gesture is not nearly as obvious, is not presented nearly as obviously. So this book prescribes a method to continue development of the hand, the body, the ear, and the mind that falls squarely in line with the revered Taubman approach to playing the piano. That's an approach that's typically taught at the highest levels of the music conservatory. And in this book, that approach is made accessible to the early intermediate pianist. Faber even lists on their website that this book goes along with their levels 3A and 3B. That's incredibly early in your journey at the piano. In my own life, I was playing rep at level 10 RCM and beyond that before I had a teacher that introduced the Taubman technique to me and changed my approach at the piano for the better. It took so long to get to that point for me. So if you're a self-taught pianist, there are so many gold nuggets throughout this book, and it's written in an incredibly accessible way. Even if you're a teacher that's familiar with Taubman and work on these types of gestures already with your students, just think of this book as added value, because you don't have to rely on your students remembering the 3 to 5 minutes you spent in your lesson talking about wrist movement. They can take this book home, and the wording and the instructions are so clear and well thought out that this book provides the perfect practice companion. Now, one of the craziest parts, it's only $9. I know musicians who have spent 6 figures learning Taubman technique from the masters, and you can get this very thorough introduction to it for $9. I realize that this sounds just a bit like an ad for this book of new thoughts on Hanon, but honestly, it tackles a handful of things that I'm so passionate about, and that is, 1, providing great education to lots and lots of aspiring pianists, and 2, keeping the cost of that education accessible to lots of people, and 3, helping to reshape outdated ideas into modern and applicable ones using one of the most revered approaches to piano technique that has ever been developed. In the weeks and the months following this video, I'll be releasing walkthroughs of each gesture and also walkthroughs of most of the exercises in the book so you can have something to reference or to practice along with as you either use my videos or you consider getting your own copy of the book. I'll leave an Amazon link to pick it up in the description below. It is an affiliate link, so if you do buy it after clicking, I might get a penny. It's the perfect way to practice smarter and not just harder. And it's the perfect way to begin learning the Taubman approach. If you learned something in this video or you just appreciated the heads up about this resource, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I will hope to see you in the next video.